Tonight on the Best of Mike and the Mad Dog, Mike and Chris recap the ALCS with Yankees manager Joe Torre. Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig joins the boys to discuss the baseball playoffs. And Mike Barnacle of the New York Daily News calls in to chat about Game 7 of the ALCS. It all happens now on the Best of Mike and the Mad Dog.
The manager of the American League champion New York Yankees is Joe Torre.
Joe, congratulations. How are you?
Thanks, guys. I'm tired. But,
just another trip, Joe, huh?
Yeah, this was, I thought the week we played the Mets was tough, but this was almost impossible. It was so riveting, and this game yesterday was so unbelievable that, it's something that'll remain with us for as long as I know.
Joe, you made I was watching all the tapes this morning and late last night. You made an interesting comment. None of us wanted anything to do with the Red Sox, but now that we won, boy, it's rewarding to have played them.
Oh, yeah, no question. You knew if you beat them, it was going to be extra special. But, after going through the season we did and losing the first game of the division series and then seeing Boston lose the first game to Oakland, the first two games to Oakland, Oakland was beat up a little bit, even though they had beat us 6 out of 9. We knew how tough Boston was. And then when they win 3 there, we said, well, we just hitch the belts up. I mean, we just have to go out there and then hope that we pitch as well as we're capable of pitching. And every single game was a cliffhanger.
Well, the bottom line is, Joe, after the Red Sox came back and did a great job in Game 6, down in the 7th inning, and got that lead yesterday, and you made a good point. I mean, they needed that 5th run. 1st and 3rd, 4th inning.
That was the turning point of the game.
I know Veritek, I can't get on him. He's a good hitter. And Damon, I understand him too. But Mussina did the job for you, Joe. They get that 5th run there. That was a huge run in that ball game in the 4th inning yesterday.
Chris, there's no doubt about it. In fact, Mussina, when we brought him in that situation, the only question we had was he ready. We give him some time when we weren't sure if he'd be ready, and when he was, there was no hesitation because I think Veritek was like 3 for 37 against him. And he had hit that force play grounder in Boston in the game we lost up there to shortstop, and he struck him out with that curveball. And, we didn't know how to position our infielders, to be honest with you. We certainly didn't want to run the score. We know Johnny Damon's very difficult to double up, so we got our infielders, our middle infielders, in shorter than double play, positioning, and the ball was hit right at Jeter, and he did the perfect thing. He had to take it himself, so you don't have to worry about an exchange.
Joe, as well as Mussina was pitching, the 3 innings, he only threw 33 pitches. Was it a pitch thing, or was it just a field thing, how long he could go? Well,
we felt there was 1 inning left in him, and since the next inning was starting with 2 left-handers, we decided that instead of having him start the inning and not sure if he could finish it, we were going to go with Heredia. But it was on the verge of being about out of gas.
I think the only time, well, I think 2 things. One, that first Giambi homer, and interesting that you drop him to 7 and he hits 2 homers.
I was thinking about that, too. Magic touch, Joe. I don't know what you did as a player.
It also says something about him, I think, a little bit. Everyone's been on Giambi, but Giambi kind of sucked it up pretty good last night.
He really did. In fact, the thing I felt badly about was when I didn't decide yesterday until coming to the ballpark. I thought about it in the morning about changing the order and getting them out of the middle, and then when I did it and I gave it to our hitting coach, Rick Down, to post it, then we had the water main break, and Jason didn't get here until later than he normally does, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him before we posted the lineup. But when I did see him and explained it, he says, Skip, if that's the way you feel, we're better equipped to win, let's do it. It was never a hesitation, never a look downward. You could see the frustration that he hadn't been able to do the job, and he's the one that really breathed life back into us yesterday, because 4-0 against Pedro, you don't know if he can break through or not.
Plus, you had a mix and match to make sure that they don't get a run even in those middle innings. That's kind of, that's like walking a tightrope. You started mixing and matching the lefties and the righties just to say, hey, I can't give them another run in this game.
Yeah, well, we had everybody. In fact, when we had Rivera in the game for those last 3 innings, Contreras was next in line, and Mel Stottlemyre went and told Andy Pettit to get his spikes on, so he was heading down the bullpen too.
Joe, what did you feel? Were you surprised at little that Pedro start the 8th, or were you not surprised at that?
Well, you know, it's tough to be surprised when you got a guy like Pedro. You know how good he is. Even 80% of him is better than 100% of other people, and he knows what he's doing out there. He's not going to scare. And obviously, when Grady went out there, if he wanted to make a change, he'd have called for the pitcher before he got to the mound. You know, I did it how many times with David Cohn. Went out there, how do you feel? You know, and David Cohn said to me one time, I'll get this guy. I said, okay. And then after he got that guy, I left him in for the next guy, and it was a grand slam. But, you know, you have to when Grady went out there, I'm sure he wasn't sure what he was going to do, and he was going to pretty much let Martinez tell him what he wanted to hear. Because, you know, going out there like that, I think he wanted to leave him in the game.
If there was a point of despair last night, Joe, I would think it was the Ortiz homer where everyone then felt, you know, maybe this wasn't going to be a Yankee night.
Yeah, in fact, I accused Boomer after the game. He did that on purpose to me. But that did take a little wind out of our sails. But then we got it back. You know, when Jeter got the 2-strike hit, and all of a sudden things started happening.
Unbelievable, Joe. And then you probably didn't like the idea that inning ended on that weird play at second base because Soriano hit the ball fairly hard. Walker, who played well last night defensively, makes a nice play.
You don't expect the Red Sox to get any luck.
You probably thought, uh-oh, maybe this luck's going to go back. It was one of those weird games, and maybe it turns the other way after Soriano grounded out there in the 8th inning.
No question, because we had the momentum on our side. It looked like Timlin was, you know, seemed a little tentative because he threw 4 straight balls to Garcia, and then ball 1 to Soriano. And, you know, I went against what I normally do, and I had Soriano taken 1-0 because it just looked like, you know, he was having trouble finding the strike zone. And he threw him an 80-mile-an-hour fastball right down the middle. I wanted to kick myself in the rear end. But then Sori hit the ball hard, and then, you know, it hits the mound. If it doesn't hit the mound, it's up the middle, and, you know, we're celebrating earlier maybe.
Interesting. You gave Soriano, that's a good job. It's good information, Joe. You gave Soriano the take sign on 1-0 in that 8th inning, huh?
Yeah, only because he had thrown 5 straight balls, and it just looked like he was uneasy out there. And then knowing that Sori doesn't necessarily wait for a strike.
Plus, Sori had struck out. I don't know if that affects Soriano, but he had struck out 4 times in a row. I wondered if that maybe, did that play into it at all in your mind?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you know, he obviously wasn't up there swinging with a lot of confidence, although he's unpredictable. He's a little like Bernie in that regard. But it was, you know, when that happened, and then when Walker made the catch on Bernie later on, I said, uh-oh, I don't like this either. And then you start figuring out how long Mo was going to go. You know, he had to get out of trouble a couple of different innings, so it took a lot out of him.
Joe, was there any chance in the world he could have gone for a 4th inning?
No.
No chance?
No, because after 2, I looked at Mel and said, what do you think? He says, let me go check with him. And when he came back, he says, we got 1 more. And, you know, we pretty much drained Mo that inning, and it couldn't have been. I mean, it couldn't have been set up any better to have Aaron Boone, you know, hit the knuckleball out of the ballpark. In fact, right before that, Zim was saying, you know, it's not impossible somebody hit a home run on this guy, you know, because we hadn't been able to do anything against him a couple of the starts he's had.
You know, I almost got the feeling last night, Joe, that the questions that have been asked for 2 years about all the new guys got answered, especially Mussina and Giambi, the high-ticket guys. And, yeah, it was Bernie last night, and it was still Jeter, and it was still Posada. But everyone had said, well, we haven't seen these other guys come back and have that historic comeback and have that gut-check game. And now these guys have had that as part of the Yankees.
Yeah, no question. I think we found out a lot about ourselves the last trip into Boston during the season. That middle game of that 3-game series when Pedro had us 4-0 again in Pettit's game, and we come back and win that game, win the next game. Struggled in Toronto and then come back and lose the first 2 to Boston, and then Wells picks us up in that last one. You know, they started understanding how hard it is to win and how hard they had to work, and they certainly pulled it together. And last night they weren't going to be denied. You know, once we broke through for a couple of runs, I think the 1 run deflated me more than it deflated our players, the extra run that they tagged on.
You know, Joe, the one thing about it, though, and I was thinking about this last night, you know, when the Lakers hired Phil Jackson that first year, And they were down by 21 to whatever it was, 15 to Portland. It's an NBA thing, Game 7.
Yeah.
You know, I said, you know, they hired Jackson to calm his team down in this spot. He can make all the money he wants. This is the reason why they hired him. And I was thinking about that last night. Yankees, your calmness probably helps a team that hasn't won yet, this particular team. Maybe that calmness helped your ball club come from 4-0 down last night.
Well, you know, I tell you, that's what I feel is important, because you don't want to have a look of despair on your face. You don't want to have a look of panic knowing you're 4 runs behind Pedro. The only thing I kept reminding guys about was the fact that Pedro had leads before, and we came back on him. He had leads against Oakland. They came back on him. So this is, you know, it's a tall mountain to climb, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done.
And it was a nice blend last night. It was kind of the old and the new. It was Mussina and Boone and Giambi, and it was also Jeter with the hit and Bernie with the big hit, Posada, and, of course, always Rivera. I mean, you almost have to put Rivera into a different class. I mean, he almost have to like build his own shrine somewhere now. I mean, it's gotten to the point of, it's now to the point of legend, his status as a relief pitcher.
Yeah, let's not leave out Matsui. That double down.
That was a very big double. You're absolutely right.
That was a big double. He had 2 strikes on him. But Rivera, I mean, if there was any question about, you know, where he was and where he is now, I think last night was, you put an exclamation point on it.
All right, there's still a series to play, although people will need a couple of days, deep breath.
How do you recover to play this first game? That's the first question.
If anyone's used to it, they are, that's for sure.
I'll tell you what, I mean, after that 7 games, not that you take Florida lightly. I mean, you watch that stuff on TV, and they beat a very good Chicago team with the pitching they had. They don't want to be denied either, but the stress involved in playing the Boston Red Sox 26 times in 1 year is awesome. And, you know, we're going to enjoy this. We're going to enjoy it. We're not sure who the hell's going to pitch tomorrow, but we're going to enjoy it.
That was my next question. Now, can you go Wells to set everything up with the big 4, or do you have to slide Wells to Sunday and then go after that with the big 3, which would mean someone else would only get 1 start other than just Clemens, and then would mean a Contreras or, dare I say, even Weaver in a Saturday game? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's possible. You know, the guys aren't here yet, so, you know, we're going to have to start taking the temperature of guys. And, you know, we're here now, the coaches and myself, because we're going to have meetings, and then the players will be here 3 to 4. So, you know, we'll the names you mentioned are the ones we're talking about. So, you know, we'll see how Boomer came out of last night. You know, Contreras, I don't like taking him out of the bullpen, but he's a possibility.
Could you start Weaver in a game 1, Joe? Is it possible?
I could start Weaver because we'd have plenty of support for him. I know one thing: Weaver wouldn't be afraid. You know, he'd go at people. We just don't know how sharp he would be. That's the only concern I'd have. So, you know, later today we'll have it figured out.
Joe, one thing, because it's been buzzing around. I know it's going to be on the show this afternoon. Somewhere was a couple of stories today about Zim saying he was going to leave. Now, as popular as Zim is, it's always going to be news. What's up with Zim?
Well, you know, I think they caught him last night very emotional. I mean, we were all emotional last night, and you know, Bill Madden went into the coach's room and started asking some questions, and you know, there had been a lot of banging around this year, and then Zim just reacted to it, and you know, and then they ran with it, I guess. And, you know, I mean, you've been around him long enough to understand that he doesn't hold anything back. He tells you how he feels. And as I say, he cares very deeply. I don't know what he's going to do. You know, I know what the story said, that he's going to walk away after the World Series. I hope it's not the case. But I just have to chalk that one up to you know, to an emotional night for everybody last night.
Joe, put this in perspective. You've had so many big wins, so many great runs here. 96 was unbelievable, obviously. The great team of 98 and go on and on. So many big wins coming from behind. Was last night, let me take a game and then series, was last night as big a game as you've had in a Yankee uniform?
Run that by me again, Mike. I'm sorry.
Was last night as big a game and as emotional a game as you've ever had in a Yankee uniform?
You know what? Not to slight anybody that's played on this club while I managed. That was the best, most satisfying, best game I have ever been involved with in my life. And it's going to be tough to top that one.
Wow.
Good job, Joe. Good luck in the World Series. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Joe. Mike and the Mad Dog on a Fan. We're going to have the Commissioner of Baseball on in just a second. And he's with us, Doug.
All right, let's introduce Bud Selig, who spends a few minutes with us on this Friday afternoon. Yes, of course, as well.
Yep.
Commissioner, good to have you aboard. Christopher Russo and Mike Francesa, how are you today?
Yes, how are you guys? Nice to talk to both of you.
Mr. Commissioner, how are you?
I'm good. I'm fine. How could I be anything but after the last 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, I mean, you've had a great couple of weeks here with these ratings, Commissioner. It's the rebirth of baseball the last 2 weeks. You got to feel pretty good about that.
Well, I do. You know, I'm not even sure that I don't believe it's a rebirth. I've been saying that, you know, we're in the midst of a renaissance, and I'll tell you guys, I can remember, I don't often allow myself this, but 10 years ago when we went to 3-division wild card, I took more than a fair amount of criticism, I guess. And when I see how it's worked the last 3 weeks, and really the last couple of years, but this year has been spectacular. And what really set this whole thing up, I think, was September, because we had all these great division races. We had the wild card races. Yes, you had some teams with great history, the Red Sox and the Cubs and the Yankees, obviously. And the matchups were phenomenal. The division championship series were tremendous, and then of course the LCS. I mean, we've had ratings that have been just stunning. I don't know how else to describe them. Absolutely stunning.
Astronomical. First time in a generation that baseball's ever chased programming off the air, which it did the last 2 nights. But do you think the networks will believe that it is baseball resurgence, or just the fact that you had a classic Yankee, Red Sox, and the Cubs, who became obviously an enormous American story?
Well, there's no question they are an enormous American story. Having grown up and watched the whole Cub phenomena for the last 60-plus years, I understand it very well. Also, obviously, the Boston Yankee thing. I think it goes much deeper than that, though, because our Saturday afternoon ratings were up all year. The Club's television ratings generally were up, except some of the Cubs having very bad years. Other than that, the attendance in the sport, I must tell you guys, from July 15th on through September 28th was really good. I mean, we were down. Everybody was piling dirt on us. It looked bad. Interleague play came along, and there was a terrific spike. And then we sort of went along, and then came the All-Star game, which is, was controversial until we played it and found that everybody loved it, including the fans, and I guess the New York Yankees today, since they have home field advantage now.
Absolutely.
And but that seemed to set things off. That's why I think that was so important. And then, so since July, you've really had a rebirth, and the renaissance, I believe, really continues. So, no, of course it was great having the Red Sox, and it was great having the Cubs. But, no, I think it goes much deeper, and there's no doubt in my mind that the future is going to prove that it was much deeper. It was baseball.
All right, Bud, let's get to a couple of the TV issues. Number one, no game of the week. 2 weeks there in September. You gave Fox the option early. They took it. Yet then in September, we didn't get a chance to watch some of these great wild card races that you just talked about. Can you get that changed?
Well, they have a lot of other programming. I'm worried about that. Fortunately, the last Saturday when it really counted in Chicago, we had it, and that was good. But yes, we're definitely going to talk about that for next year, because I think what we've done with this system, I mean, it was designed to bring September back. It brought September back, and we got to take advantage of that in every way.
I agree with that. The other problem that a lot of people had, and I'm sure the city of Boston did, was you had a great game in Oakland, Game 1, that was on at 10:05 at night in Boston.
Well, Mike, let me tell you, it's the one thing that every Wednesday during the division championship series we've had to wrestle with, and I hate it, and I admit to you, I hate it. I worry about it. There doesn't seem to be any solution. The rest of the games are on. In fact, we've had a lot of day games. I think you would agree in both rounds. A lot of day games.
Why wouldn't you do, Bud? Why can't you just put the Cubs at 1 that day and have the Giants at 4 and have the A's and Red Sox start at 8? Well, I know you want to get the ratings.
Well, I'll tell you why. If you want to get the ratings, I must tell you, interestingly, and look, we're going to reconsider all that because I hate that game, but the 1 o'clock games don't get ratings. I mean, there's no question about it. And the Boston game, you know when the greatest rating was that night? 11:30 to 12:30 or 1 o'clock. That's when the ratings really jumped up. And so it turned out they got an 18 and did extremely well. However, having said that, look, starting games at 10 o'clock is tough, so we're going to have to figure a different way.
Why does the Game 6 of the World Series start at 8:55, that one game?
Game 6, well, now they may have programming.
Because that's the one game that's different. If there were a Game 6 back at Yankee Stadium, it's an 8:55 first pitch for some reason.
I don't think that's right.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that's right. In fact, I'm sure that it isn't.
But how about the two games we don't like, the ALCS and the NLCS, but the one game on Fox Sports Net?
By the way, incidentally, just get back to, I believe it's 7:55.
Oh, 7:55.
I'm sure. I don't have the schedule right in front of me right now, but I know there's no game. We, believe me, are making a very conscientious effort to start our games as early as is possible.
Okay. Right, that makes
interestingly enough, though, and the one thing that sort of confounds a lot of people, the longer the game takes, the greater the ratings as we get into 10:30, 11, 11:30.
I think because you bring in, Bud, you bring in that news audience that's not a baseball audience that's waiting for the news that jumps in and watches the game.
Well, that, and I think, Mike, there's a myriad of factors that play into it. That is one of them, certainly. But the fact of the matter is that if we were running the networks, there's no question that that's when they produce their greatest ratings.
How about can you get a change, Bud? The two games in a row there, same time in the NL and the ALCS. Is this game 101?
Yeah, that's another one where we put them on. Had a lot of criticism, although I must admit I was home that night and I was going back and forth with my little clicker.
Yeah, but you want to watch the games in a doubleheader that day, a baseball fan.
No, well, that's right, and I understand. Again, the problem is that there are a couple of, it isn't, people say, well, football never does it. Look, guys, football is not trying to put that many games on at one time. We have a problem trying to put them on in prime time. The 1 o'clock games are just, quite frankly, deadly. And no matter what the matchup is, even the 4 o'clock game doesn't come close to the 8 o'clock game. So what you're trying to do, after all, what is the objective here? The objective is to get the maximum number of your fans watching your game. That's what we're trying to do. But we have some nuances that we really do have to work on.
Mike and the Mad Dog with the Commissioner of Baseball, Bud Selig, off what has been a brilliant October for baseball, and the best ratings in a generation, really startling ratings. One thing before we get back to the Commissioner, David Wells will pitch Game 1 for the Yankees, just announced by Joe Torre.
Wow.
So it would be Wells and Penny. There was a thought that they may have to use another guy rather than one of the big four, but they won't. They'll start with David Wells. Commissioner, I saw that you were upset, Bud, with the champagne display, or just the unruliness, at least that was the report about what went on with the Marlins celebration. You want to take the champagne out, or you just want to put it in a different place?
Well, look, the teams can do what they want. Having run a team, I went through that, and I understand all that. Frankly, it makes no sense to me. You ought to have a ceremony where the trophy is awarded, the MVP is awarded. Put that somewhere else.
Maybe move it on a field?
If you have the media, you've got what the players want to do themselves is fine. But you ought not to have, the media guys are in there trying to work, television people are trying to work, and dumping champagne on them. No, I know I don't like that, and I don't think that's in anybody's interest. I'm not telling them later on, once they get in the clubhouse, they can do whatever they want to do. But there ought to be accessibility for everybody, where they don't have to worry about being doused and it just, I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
All right, Bud, the Cub fans and a lot of people, including the governor of Illinois, really got on that poor kid.
Just mindless.
On the interference. Now, what's your thoughts on that?
I just heard the term mindless.
That was mine.
Yeah, good for you. Look, Steve Bartman didn't lose that game. That's crazy. First of all, there were 4 people reaching for the ball. It was unfortunate, but it happens. It happens in every ballpark in America. That game was lost by a series of factors, one of which Mark Pryor walked Castile. Then he had Rodriguez 0-2 and threw him a cripple that he lined to left field for a base hit. Then Alex Gonzalez botched a double play ball. I mean, to blame the kid is just, it's just nonsense. And I think it's sad. I really do. The only thing, I understand the passion. I mean, the passion this has generated everywhere is just great. It's tough to live with because it creates some circumstances like this, quite frankly. But I mean, to blame this young man, I think is just, well, let me use your term, mindless. That's the best way to put it. And it's wrong. It's just dead wrong.
But we've had a postseason of, enormous excitement. I mean, you can't even describe it. It's been so good. And it's really pushed all the economic stuff for the first time in a long time off the pages. But now the Yankees are back in the World Series. They're playing a team like the Marlins. You're going to get into people again across the country, baseball guys across the country, and say, look at this. When they start to examine, no one has really slowed the Yankee spending to any real extent. Talk about how you think your plan is being implemented and whether you feel it is working.
Mike, I think the plan is being implemented. I think I said last year when Anaheim won, it was the first real dramatic manifestation of revenue sharing. I think it's worked again. We had 17 or 18 teams up until the last 6 to 8 days of the season, 26-week season. That was 25 weeks. It was just tremendous. This is the first year of the new labor agreement. I think it has been unbelievably good. You'll see it better in years 2, 3, and 4. There's no question in my mind about that. But I'm really, I just couldn't be happier because you are watching, and I think a lot of people don't quite understand the economic landscape of the game is being changed. And the fact that the Yankees are still there, look, that's fine. I mean, I really have no problem with that at all. But you will see continuing change in the economic landscape, and the fact that the Marlins are there without revenue sharing and other things, it could never have happened.
Does it bother you, though, Bud, that the Yankees are at 185 with the payroll and the Marlins are about 50?
No, I guess ask me that question in a year or 2 or 3, and I think you're going to see a lot of differences.
You do?
Even for the Yankees?
Yes. No question.
All right, a couple other things here to get to. The Expos, where do you stand with them right now?
Well, we're still talking to the players. We'd like to play 22 games again in San Juan, and I think that Rob Manfred and Gene Orza are making some progress towards that end. And we got to find a permanent home. We want to do it quickly. This is the last residue of contraction, and I knew it would be difficult. But the thing that people, I think, tend to forget, given Omar Minaya and Frank Robinson in particular and Tony Tavares, I think they've done a great job. The Expos have been contenders for 2 years. It's been a remarkable story. It could have been a very painful story for us. And we need to find a permanent home. But in the meantime, it's worked out as well as anybody could have ever conceived.
Now, how about this new stadium for these other cities? What's the story about it? Portland, Washington. What's the story about that?
Well, our relocation committee, Chris, is talking to a lot of people, a lot of different cities. There's tremendous interest. We have a great offer, incidentally, from Monterrey, Mexico, to play some games. The internationalization of our sport is very, very important to me, and so I feel good about where we are. I really feel good, and we'll analyze. A lot of the cities are, making good bids, but getting a stadium built today, guys, is pretty tough given the economy and everything else. So we're moving in the right direction, albeit a little slower. But I keep saying to our people, look, it's important to get it done right. It's more important to get it done right than just trying to get it done fast.
But this came up a lot the last couple weeks of the season, and I wondered if there's anything that can be done about it, and that was the Giants and the Braves and this chase for the best record, which both teams had huge leads. They were kind of fighting for the best record. Fans are involved in that. My partner's involved in it every day because he's such a Giant nut. And then the last week...
I understand that. How does he get to be such a great Giant?
He always was since the days of Bobby Bonds. But then the last week of the season, Philippe Lugan comes out basically and says, we don't care. I mean, how do you get the fans to invest so much time into this whole thing and then the team says, I don't care?
That's a very fair question because you got to care. It's a home field advantage. I mean, there's no look at it's why I believe every game should be played. There was one game with the Mets,
right. That's what I'm talking about.
The brownout, and it turns out I wasn't going to make them fly back because that would have been even more of a disadvantage. But the lesson for the future is that we're going to make up every game, and no matter what anybody says, because it does matter. And then when they lose, Mike, and they've been disadvantaged by one game, then those are the same people that'll complain a lot.
How about the bullpen scenario last week in Boston in Game 3, buddy? Are you still investigating this whole thing?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are, and so are the Boston Police Department. Look, the whole thing was really unfortunate. it's again reflective of the passion of these playoffs. I mean, there's just no question about it. We've had a lot of tension in a lot of areas. I don't have to tell you guys about the Boston-New York relationship at every level. It's a tense one, to say the least. But what I said last Sunday, and I guess I don't mind saying it here again today, I told both parties I'll cut it out. Just cut it out.
Did you find the Red Sox to have?
Well, one thing I never do is whatever I do to any of the clubs, or other than the players, which we announced, I never announced that. But I was not going to allow the clubs to exacerbate what was already a very, very tense situation. And so I did have last Sunday one of my, I guess now famous but petulant temper tantrums.
But when you saw these, and your assistants brought you the paper that showed you these ratings, truth be told, were you shocked at how good they were this week?
Stunned. And I don't mind telling you, I've looked forward. I'm sort of going to miss this, although I have it again during the World Series. Every morning early, sometimes really early, they'll call me at home, or otherwise as soon as I get here, I can't wait to see the rating. Look, I knew this thing was good in the Division Championship Series, Mike. We were getting 6s, and Chris 7s and 8s, but when we began to get 14s and 16s, and now last night 21-2. I mean,
amazing.
You were right. We're getting generationally new numbers. I mean, given what's happened to the television environment, everybody said the ratings can't come back, and they won't come back, and the game is past its time rather than the pastime, and so on and so forth. You bet. This has been a joy for me, and yes, I don't mind telling you, I have been stunned.
One last one, Bud, and that's the umpire thing with the Quaztec system. Can you figure out a way to get it in every ballpark so we don't have it in half the ballparks?
Yeah, we're going to make some changes and talk about it, Sandy Alderson and I and others, during the off-season, so we clear up. We actually, the last month or two, went along pretty smoothly, but there are bugs there. I mean, it's the right thing to do. Listen, we're all held accountable. And that's what the hell. The three of us are held accountable, and there's no reason to believe that the umpires shouldn't, but we need the right system to make sure we're moving in the right direction.
Bud, well done. Thanks a lot. Good luck this week.
Thanks a lot, guys. Nice to talk to both of you.
Thank you, Bud.
Okay, that's Bud Selig.
I very much appreciated his message to me before Game 6, which I, would gladly return to him now that the series is over. Of course, we're talking about Mike Barnacle, the long-suffering Red Sox fan, to give us a little perspective on the series and on the situation in Boston.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead. This is the one call I'm allowed to make from the mental hospital where I've been since last night at 12:15.
Listen, I'm not even a Red Sox fan, and I'm dying today because I hate the Yankees so much. But did you think at any time, even with your history, Jackie McMullen wrote in today's Boston Globe, the Chief thought it was over. Even in your history, at 4-0 and 5-2, did you feel the game was over?
Doug, I got to tell you, I never thought the game was over, okay? But part of last night's package, and I'm having difficulty figuring out how to deal with it actually right now, is I took my 10-year-old boy, Timmy, he's nearly 11, he's going to be 11 in November, down to the stadium for last night's game. I had been there the night before, and I told him if it went 7, he'd go. And I arrived with him at about 5 o'clock at the ballpark. I was fully confident they were going to get this deal done. And I was fully confident that the deal was going to get done as the game continued. And Tim turned to me and asked me how come I had a smile on my face when Giambi hit the second home run. And I said, because when it's close, it makes it better, Tim. It makes it better. It makes it better when you beat them. Look around, and the stadium was a cauldron of noise and energy and emotion, and it's a great park anyway. And so I satisfied Tim with that answer. And then Nick Johnson pops up in the 8th, and then we know what happens in the 8th. And I had one of my other sons was with me as well, and he nudged me as the score was about to be tied 5-5, and he said, "Dad," he said, "you better check on Tim." And I looked down, and Tim had been standing throughout the entire game nearly, and he was slumped in his seat, and he was crying uncontrollably.
Oh, my God. That's brutal.
And I thought to myself, what have I done? What have I done? I mean, I have endured this all of my life, And this is what I've passed on to my kids.
Oh my gosh!
Because it's one thing. I don't mind losing a game, and I bet Chris, and I bet Mike is the same way. A physical error, those things happen. The ball through the legs, okay, it happens. Forget the phony curse stuff. It happens.
That's not phony. That's real. That curse. Boy.
Well, I'll tell you what the curse is. The curse is having, and I like the guy, having a mental midget in the dugout who had a stroke during the game. You got to take that guy out.
We agree with you on that, but I'm amazed. You got to take him out. When would you have taken him out? Let's start there first.
I wouldn't have sent him out for the eighth.
That's where I was. I mean,
he never would have been on my mound.
And then he couldn't, and he can't pitch to Matsui. I mean, that's the one thing. And hey, listen, Pedro can endure the blame because when you're supposed to be that good, you endure the blame. I mean, and Pedro did stand up and take the blame after the game, which to his credit. And he sat there long after the game in his little hood on the dugout, in the dugout. So he took the blame. But boy, I'm sure. Up in Boston today, I mean, the manager must be getting, with all that passion up there, he must be getting absolutely torched.
He's toast.
You think he's out?
I am firmly convinced that he will not be back.
So he can't. Do you
can't
think
fire the guy off that one move? You can't.
Chris, you can.
No, if you do that, then what happens to the next guy? If we have a manager every year, you're going to find something you don't like in a big game, and you're going to fire 9 million managers.
The next guy, you tell him, no matter who you have on the team, I don't care whether it's Nomar Garciaparra or Pedro Martinez, we hire you to lead, we hire you to make decisions, you're the manager, go out and make the decision. Don't let the guy talk you into staying in the game. You know what he's endured over the past couple of years. You know he's very fragile. It's not 3 years ago. He doesn't have the giddy up on old number one. He can't whip it up there 96, 97 miles an hour. If he's in there in the eighth inning and he's trying to finesse the left-handed batters that he's had some degree of difficulty with prior to this game, you got to get him out of there.
So you think he'll pay? You think he'll pay with his job?
I do.
But I'd be surprised.
Well,
who's going to manage? I mean,
before we get to that, where would you put this loss? I'm into this.
Number one.
Number one.
And I'll tell you why.
That's what I was looking to hear. I want to hear this torment.
I'll tell you why. I can go through them. And I was at,
what?
Except for the 48 playoff game with Danny Galehouse and Gene Bearden and the Indians, I wasn't there. But you want to take 75, the Game 7 loss in 75. Let's start there.
Go ahead.
That defeat occurred in the wake of just a euphoric moment, the Fisk home run.
Right.
And it occurred at a time when baseball was perhaps at its low ebb in the latter half of the 20th century, and everyone knew that the series, the Reds and the Red Sox, had already brought baseball back to a point where it had never been before. And people were so excited about the Carbo-Fisk game. It was an exciting game that, sure, the loss was a letdown, and there was a sadness.
That's the problem with Boston. You guys got so worked up about a game that you ended up losing in the World Series anyway. They would never do that in New York.